In today's speech, my plan is to try and talk about the false solution about ridding America's firearms and guns. So it's not really going to reduce crime, but I'm hoping that during the speech I can try and inform you that to persuade my general purpose is to persuade the anti-gun lobbyists or the ill-informed persons that trying to banish all weapons is not the exact right move, or that's not really that possible. We'll get to that in just a second. The specific purpose is to have all anti-gun lobbyists or ill-informed Americans or criminals, ill-informed Americans that criminals will continue to commit terrible acts with or without guns, like I was saying. And then also that assault rifles is a term they use to describe scary guns. So pretty much like an assault rifle is what everyone thinks of when they think of an Armalite 15 or an AR-15. So it's a semi-automatic weapon that has the sear pin pulled out so it can't shoot fully automatic. But since it looks scary, has a 30 round magazine that you can reload or whatever, and also has a pistol grip on it. It just seems to have that military look and that military impression. So a lot of people think that it is an assault rifle. There have been times where it has been used in the less than admirable ways, but it's not the main purpose. And we'll get to that as well in a second. And the thesis statement I have is America has had the ability to maintain a well-regulated militia according to the Declaration of Independence since its inception. Our firepower has deterred major military attacks on the U.S. and continental U.S. without firing a shot, and we'll get to that as well in a second. But to get to the main part of the speech, is the attention getter is with all news stories, the mass shooter targeting innocent people. There have been a lot of controversies around the United States around gun laws, sparking some political and politicians like Beto O'Rourke, who is a Democratic representative out of Texas in the 16th district, saying that he plans on taking them away. So the introduction to this topic is my objective today is to lean you away from the strict gun control and hopefully inform you that the misconceptions of the media is trying to push is not the truth about firearms, that their actual capabilities and their restrictions will do more harm than good. Credibility and relevance is, to be fair, and I'm trying to give all the evidence out there, so I don't want to give like all of a right side Republican conservative or all of a left side Democratic, liberal viewpoint on this, because some people are just walking around saying guns are guns, let me keep my guns, and then there's other people who don't seem to be informed on how or what the weapon actually is, the tool that it actually is, and they think that the weapon itself isn't the reason for the crime. So we're going to begin with this by starting to talk about gun control, the innocent lives that are lost due to violence. The Federal Bureau of Investigations has a document that shows the rise of active shooter incidents and compares the 2016 to 2017 incidents against the 2015-2016 incidents. Now, with that, the numbers have increased greatly. So around 2014-2015, there were about 231 casualties, with 92 deceased in those casualties in any, like what they define as an active shooter or a mass casualty incident. Between 2016 and 2017, only a few years later, the time frame number jumps between 943 and 221 per, 943 person were injured. 221 of those people actually, were deceased due to their injuries. But with those, the rifle, which is what Beto is trying to take away, the assault rifle or the semi-automatic firearm that he's trying to take away, was not the major cause or major player in those incidents. A lot of them had to do with actual pistols and shotguns for close quarters combat. So targeting the Armalite AR-15 is a biased opinion of an unsafe weapon. Let's see here. Between 1982 and 2019, in 115 different incidences, 55 rifles were used. Now, mind you, that's 1982 to 2019. There were 55 incidences where rifles were used, 30 incidences where shotguns were used, which actually were deemed safe by former Vice President Joe Biden, who said shotguns are all right, just don't get a rifle. But they took almost half of the incidents that these rifles were involved in. 141 handguns were used to carry out the mass shootings. Now that's a huge thing. The crime involving handguns this isn't just an active shooter. This is the crime involving handguns in 2018 alone was 6,603. Now mind you, 2018, 1 year span, in 6,603 of those incidences were pistols, or handguns, or whatever you want to call them. Now, The ones that involved knives were 1,515. So just sit there and think about that for a second. So if we're targeting rifles and rifles alone, why don't we try and look at handguns and how these personnel actually acquired the handguns? But we're going to get into that as well in just a second. So the politicians used the word assault-style weapon to invoke fear and the same mechanics that are used for hunting rifles. So if you have a 5.56, which is what an Armalite AR-15 generally consists of. So an Armalite 15 has a 5.56 NATO. But if you have something like a 223, which is a normal round used for hunting, most hunters use a bolt-action rifle. But there are incidences where they have a semi-automatic or, you know, some kind of mechanic of that nature. It's hard to get a fully automatic weapon because with those you have to have a Class 3 license. That's $3,000 tax stamp a year plus the tax that goes through the ATF. But, so, dogs. Anyway, so, with those, yeah, there's a lot of mechanics that follow along a same with the 5.56 as they do with the 223. Now, just because it has a pistol grip and it has an A-frame front sight and all this other stuff, people seem to be more scared of it because they say it's an assault-style weapon because they see that the military uses that same kind of body style on their weapons. Yeah, 30-round magazines. You know, you can have a 30-round magazine on a wooden stock 223 and no one really thinks it's that scary. They've actually done some social tests on that kind of stuff, and people are just like, oh, this one's scary, but it might be a 22 long rifle versus, you know, this lever action over here, which is actually a 45-70, which is an elephant gun. People don't really, you know, take in consideration the ballistics of each round. All they do is think about what the weapon looks like. It could be an airsoft gun, it could be a 22 long rifle, which is a little bitty thing, or it could be, you know, the 5.56, or it could be a 458 SOCOM. But people don't look at that. They just look at how scary the weapon is itself. And then with the fear mongering going on in social media and other media, they decide to go ahead and say, hey, you know, this gun's bad. Let's ban assault rifles. But in 1984, the assault rifle did have a ban on it from President Bill Clinton, who banned pistol grips, bayonet lugs, and any kind of magazine that consisted of 10 or more rounds. The crime during that time actually peaked. So whenever weapons that were being legally, hey, you can't have this, you can't do this, were being diminished and getting taken away, the actual crime using firearms went up. Now, there are people who are saying firearms went down, firearms went up, so it's hard to actually get an accurate reading on all that because the left is saying one thing, the right is saying one thing, and they're trying to push different stories to their own agenda. So that's where it's kind of hard to find that medium ground. So, but there was a 1994 assault ban weapon that also got rid of fully automatic weapons and any kind of actual assault weapon, which made it to where you had to have like a super clearance and you had to have a Class 3 tax stamp. So, so let's see here. The mental health and the willingness of the criminals to commit the acts and to find weapons on the black market. So this goes back with that, you know, crime rate went up with weapons, but the actual restrictions were stricter. So if someone wants to try and get a hold of a weapon, if they want to try and get a hold of a rifle, if they want to try and get a hold of a pistol, so let's say something like a High Point. High Point's really cheap, and you can find them almost anywhere in the city for probably like $200 or $150 at your local pawn shop. And for a lot of these guys, they can get their hands on them fairly easy because they know somebody, or they know somebody who bought one. They're just going to go, like my buddy, he actually had a Glock 43 in his car. Someone noticed that he was a cop and, you know, in the military, figured he probably had a weapon. As soon as he parked his car in Panama City Beach, they walked over there, broke into his car, and stole his pistol and some money. So, I mean, people steal stuff from other people. Now, mind you, yeah, he probably should have had it, you know, in a lockbox, or he probably should have, you know, taken other measures and other precautions to ensure that that weapon wouldn't be in the wrong hands. He didn't, but someone stole from him. So that's how they got that weapon. These weapons, you know, end up on the black market. There's people from like China and South Africa who are selling weapons, and there's people from like Ireland, like the Irish Republican Army, who are selling weapons across the states. There's people from the cartel in Mexico who are also selling weapons, and that, you know, it's just a giant distribution. I mean, heroin, cocaine, and methamphetamines are illegal, but they're getting distributed and imported out of the country. So, I mean, if they want to get a hold of something, they'll get a hold of something. So pretty much just that's going to be limiting the personnel who actually, like myself, follow the law and actually want to have everything done, check and balance, and not get in trouble. And I have no ill intentions with the weapons that I own. I don't have any right now. I'm in England, so it's kind of difficult. But, yeah. But with that, I would say that there's a lot of people talking about, extra background checks or whatever, but I would try and do like a mental health, assessment of that person and anybody, who's maybe around that person who could possibly have access to that weapon. So you have a safe. Now here in England, I don't really agree with it because I don't really, whatever. But here in England, if you have, like, let's say you bought a Lee Enfield 303, or if you bought a shotgun or something like that, you have to tell the local constabulary, which is the local police department, that you purchased that firearm. They have to come into your house, inspect where you're going to put your weapon safe. After they do that, they inspect the weapon, and then they also inspect to make sure that you put the ammunition in a separate area. So, with that, since they already know where all your stuff is, and since Posse Comitatus isn't the thing here, the Ministry of Defense Police can actually come in and check on your, where's your safe, where's your gun, where's your ammo. They can just come in at any time that they just, willy-nilly feel like it, and they can just do whatever they want to. But as Americans, we broke off from that because we didn't want to have to house militia or have them in our business. But that is what it is, and that's a war that we fought a couple centuries ago. So, let's see here. I'm trying to find. I actually lost my bullet point. So, how many guns are in America? There's estimated approximately every one person could own 12 guns. That's another thing that's going to be difficult whenever someone's trying to come through and actually take your weapons. So, there's a California senator who was talking about ghost guns a couple of years back. Now, he was sitting there saying that an Armalite that had a serial number and all these other tags, that one was okay. But this Armalite that he had in his left hand that didn't have any markings was illegal, and it was a mass murdering machine. Now, here's the deal with that. You can get a lower, which is pretty much just if you're sitting there looking at a rifle, you have your upper receiver, which is your buffer tube, your bolt carrier group, and all that other stuff. And if you pop that up, where you have your barrel going down, where your trigger housing is, and then where your magazine well is that connects to your buttstock, this area right here with the serial number is the only thing that has a serial number on it, and that in itself is the actual weapon according to the ATF. That's why it has to have serial number, and you can't order that over the internet. But what you can do is you can order just a giant aluminum block that looks like a lower. It doesn't have all the grooves cut out. It doesn't have a trigger well cut out. It doesn't have a magazine well cut out. It doesn't have the safety or the fire selector switch cut out of it. You can just get an aluminum block that has an outline of an AR-15 lower. With that, if someone has enough skill or they have the right drill, they can actually carve out their own weapon. So California deems this to be a ghost gun because it's untraceable. You can take this aluminum, buy it off the internet, drill it out yourself, and then you can buy the rifle, you can buy the gas tube, you can buy the sights, the buffer tube, the buttstock, the trigger housing, the pistol grip. You can literally buy an entire rifle, except for that lower, off the internet. So everyone thinks that, that's another thing, is that you can make an AR off eBay if you really wanted to. There's a lot more restrictions on it now because of the way that, media is going. That's why we're having this discussion. But it's possible. And if you were really skilled, as long as you could wrap the aluminum around your barrel, you could make a rifle out of a shovel. It'd probably be more like an AK style. But you can make it out of cheap tin if you needed to. Or, remember those old, tire jacks? You can use a shotgun out of one of those. I think 410, 20 gauge would probably fit in there. But the point is if someone wants to do something, they will. It's hard. It's hard to tell them, hard to try and just go through and take all the guns, especially from law-abiding citizens who actually bought them and went through the checks and did all the proper things. But another thing is something that he's not thinking about is everyone in America just being gun-toting crazies saved us from being attacked back in December of 1941. So, what was it? Admiral Yamamoto. He's part of he was the leader of the Japanese Navy, led the attack on Pearl Harbor back, December 7th, 1941. So whenever he was questioned years later, like, why didn't you just attack the continental U.S.? Aren't they the bigger threat? Why'd you attack this little island and, this one little fleet? He said, and I quote, "I would never invade America. There's a gun behind every blade of grass." So he was fearful of attacking the mainland. He knew that if he decided to try and board and take over, that his military, his legitimate Japanese imperial military, would not have a chance against the, we'll just say, well-regulated militia of America. So the military is not everywhere. The police aren't everywhere. And so it's always good, I think, to have every person being able to defend, country and themselves. So there is a lot of talk about, being able to protect yourself, protect my home, all this other stuff. But the bigger picture is you're not just protecting you, you're protecting those around you. And you're protecting the country itself. If the need comes, for instance, like when the Japanese wanted to attack, we as a civilian population were extremely well armed. At that time, America didn't have the best funding. We were kind of more armed up than the Americans, or the American Army. But that's neither here nor there. We're not going to get into all that. But the point is that having a bunch of weapons and the world knowing that we had them protect us from actually being invaded like the rest of Europe and the rest of Asia did at that time. So no bombings on the homeland except for Japan, which wasn't a state at the time. But if you do, or if if someone like Beto O'Rourke actually has the ability to take a bunch of weapons, that comes into something like socialism or communism. So with a gain in security, which a lot of people want security because everyone's scared. So with a gain in security, you lose freedoms. That's the way it is. And with a gain in freedoms, you'll lose security. What I mean by that is, if you've seen the movie V for Vendetta, everyone's really secure. Everyone's really safe because everyone has a strict guideline that they have to follow. And if they don't follow it, they'll be punished to a degree to where they'll want to follow it, or they'll be executed and just completely removed from the equation. So with that, let's think about communist Russia, or let's think about Germany under the Third Reich. So all those, a bunch of the citizens were de-armed. Their weapons were taken away. They weren't able to defend themselves. So they are like, hey, I don't need these freedoms. I have this security now. But with that security, the government pretty much overran. They took over cities, and they forced people into labor camps, or they forced people into, poverty, and they forced people into different areas if they didn't fit their specific agenda. And they would make sure that they were fed by rations of food, but there was no growth. And people weren't able to rise up and revolt against these personnel because they didn't have the weapons to combat the government, which is all the Declaration of Independence is about, to make sure that the American people are able to fight a tyrannical government. Everyone's like, hey, that's not a thing. It's not a thing now because we've never allowed it to be a thing. And as long as we continue that, then I think that we will be okay. And I don't want to have my freedoms taken away. I'd rather lose the security. It does suck that whenever you give somebody some freedoms, there are some horrible incidences that will happen. And we have read a lot about them, like Ohio or, Sandy Hooks and all these other areas. Horrible things have happened because people have the freedom to go out there and they have the freedom to do things, even though the law states that homicide and murder is illegal. They still find a way to do it. And, trying to restrict guns or weapons of any sort, saying, hey, you can't buy a 30-round magazine, doesn't mean that someone who doesn't have the intention to do so won't go off and do so. There's approximately 50 to 70 people killed in Chicago every weekend, or within a week, from the gang violence. Now, mind you, these people some of them have already been through prison, and they're already, felons. They are not allowed to own a firearm. Chicago is not allowed to have firearms. It's a gun-free city, and Illinois is one of the strictest gun control states in the continental U.S. But people still die by weapons because criminals find the means to commit the heinous acts that they wish to do. And that's what sucks. That's the freedoms that people are allowed to go out and do. But another thing is, if everyone Now let's sit there and think about it. So they're trying to take away weapons right now, right? So if everyone just takes away the weapons and they think it's going to solve the issue, there's still going to be people with weapons out there who want to commit these acts. If we look at the other way, and this is probably, if you've had any kind of gun control debate, I know you've heard it, where they talk about Switzerland. NRA loves Switzerland, but they do have a good plan. The thing is, Switzerland has a 2-year mandatory military service. So everyone in that country is taught how to use a weapon, and they're even able to buy that weapon when they leave the military service. We don't have that here. We're volunteer. And only like 1% of the 1% of the nation serves in the military. Now, mind you, yeah, there's law enforcement, there's veterans, there's, just old Joe from back home who's been hunting since he was 3. So there's people who know weapons, but there's a validation process of people who have firearm knowledge in Switzerland. Now, over there, everyone has the ability to carry. There's people walking around Apple stores with Galils and Tavors and, Ace 45s and Ace 57s and things like that. But the gun crime there is extremely low. The weapons, the homicide, the attacks, or any kind of petty theft is extremely low. Mass shootings. They haven't had a mass shooting, I think, since 2001. Because if someone tries to attack, everyone knows that somebody really close to you, or maybe the person you're trying to attack, has the ability to return fire, which is a huge deterrent against any kind of criminal persons that's trying to commit an act. Usually they're cowardice about it, and they want to try and take out as many targets as they can before the police show up. But Switzerland, if everyone has a rifle or everyone has a pistol, if you try to attack this guy, well, he might have a rifle and he's going to try and defend himself and shoot you back, which cuts that response time extremely short. And that's something that a lot of concealed carry members will try and do, is they don't want to show their weapons, they don't want to imprint or anything like that, but they want to make sure that they are available, that in case they're just so happen to be in the area and a need arises that someone has to get a weapon out and try and defend life and limb of others or themselves, that they can respond to it. So, with that, I think we should educate our citizens on a quick response and defense and check and balances. So instead of sitting there stripping this thing and making everybody scared, oh, hey, don't touch the guns are scary, that's going to make people more interested and ignorant of what the weapon is. If we go ahead and pull everybody in, just like we do in every other curriculum, we have to teach people taxes, we have to teach people how to drive, we have to teach people all these things. Why can't we make it to where people have to have a certification to know that they know how to handle a weapon? Some people do. It's called a hunting license. Not everybody does it, but it is what it is. Kids running around right now. So, with that, is I think that there should be some kind of course that, hey, like I had, whenever I did my conceal and carry or doing my law enforcement LEOSA, it's pretty much like, hey, this person, he's of sound mind and a sound body, and he can handle a weapon, and he knows what he's doing. He's not going to just sit there and pull it out at a party and try and fire it around like it's an old wedding in the Wild West kind of thing. So that's another thing, is not everybody, I think, should own one. I think that we should find a way to educate people on what the weapon is, how to respect it, and not just be like, hey, this is cool, I saw it on MTV, I'm going to sit there and take pictures on Instagram and Snapchat with my guns in my face. Because that's how people, and I've seen it before, where people sit there and be playing around with a weapon, completely loaded, full magazine, and they'll, inadvertently actually kill their passenger because they pointed the gun in their face thinking it'd be a joke. It's not a pretty sight, and that person got charged with homicide or manslaughter, because that's what it was. She was sitting there, she was joking around with a deadly weapon, pointed at somebody when it was loaded, didn't act as if it was loaded, thought it was a joke, it's not a toy, pulled the trigger, ended up taking that man's life. I think that's why we should educate our personnel so we don't have more things like that happening. Now, with that, there's a Brazilian president, Bolsonaro. I'm going to butcher that. Bolsonaro, he temporarily lifted the ban that Brazil was under that allows civilians to actually purchase firearms. Because in 2017, there were 64,000 murders in Brazil. 64,000 murders in Brazil 45,000 which involved firearms. Now, if we would have heard about 64,000 murders in America, then I think we'd have a different story. But the reason for that is because civilian populace, like I just said, he lived in the bands, the civilians were not allowed to buy weapons. They were not allowed to buy guns. No one was allowed to buy anything because guns are bad, right? That's kind of the whole thing about the Democrats and the more liberal view of it, is that guns are bad. If it's bad, let's just take them away. They try to do that. And Brazil had a significant crime increase. Now, mind you, it's been built up gradually since it was actually enacted. But the problem got so bad that the only way to combat it was to try and get more weapons in so that the civilian or the innocent civilian populace could actually fight and take over, and defend themselves from these criminal organizations or persons who were, just going through and killing 64,000 people, 45,000 of which was in a year. But that is what it is. And I'm hoping that, we can use that model in Switzerland's model where we can arm our citizens and educate our people instead of just taking everything away. With more mentally stable, citizens can intervene in criminals, like I was saying earlier, is that if we have someone who's been trained, like the Swiss, and, like they're any kind of military personnel and they have a weapon, open carry, or concealed carry. I say conceal. And open carry right now makes you a target. Anybody walks in, they're going to assess the situation. That guy's got a gun. You're going to be the high priority. They're going to take you out before they continue doing whatever they came there to do. Concealed carry would probably be your best bet. But if everyone had a gun, then open carry, like Switzerland, and everyone's, hey, it's a nice, G36 you got there. It's like, oh, hey, man, that's a nice Tavor, X95 you got there. So everyone's talking about weapons because it's respected, but everyone has one. So everyone knows how to handle it, and everybody knows that if someone tries to start something or someone tries to pop something off, that someone else will help engage that threat. So if a person with harm wishes to find another way, they'll be able to do so. And that, with that being said, that 2,940 persons were victim back in that, 2016 to 2017, 2,940 persons were victim of acts by other means than guns. So that was the 15, where is it at? Damn, this is small writing. So that's the 1,500 or 1,515. The 1,515 personnel who were used by or who were murdered by knives, but 2,940 that's the 1515 knives, but that's blunt objects like a baseball bat. That's strangulation with like a belt, or just choking them out, or just beating them to death with your fist, or poison, or pouring acid on their face or something like that. There are so many ways to commit these acts, and if someone wishes to do so badly, then they'll find a way, whether it be with a weapon of like a knife design, or whether it be like an Armalite 15, which everyone's scared of right now. But that's just my thoughts on that. So in conclusion, it is almost impossible for anybody to take a firearm from the American people. Like I was saying, out of every one person, there are 12 people, or out of every one person, there are 12 weapons that person can own. Now, mind you, with all the people in America, like let's say New York City or Chicago, like we mentioned earlier, has a gun-free zone, the law-abiding citizens in that area, they probably don't have a weapon. So that means that the people who live out in the country, that doubles their number. Some people could have, if one person in New York doesn't have one, but one person in the farmland does, that one person could own 24 weapons. Whether it be muzzle loader or semi-automatic or lever action, bolt action, pump action, who knows? Brake action. So, who knows? But it's probably safe to assume that's not a fully automatic weapon because it's class 3, and those are kind of rare. And suppressors, which was under the Hearing Act a couple of years ago, those are also hard to come by. You have to have a class 3 license to sell, and then whenever you have one of those weapons, like, okay, for instance, let's talk about, people don't want to talk about gun laws, or talk about the gun laws that are already enacted. So if someone has something called a short barrel rifle, now mind you, you can have an AR-15 pistol, which is a pistol, or which is it's a upper and lower, and the magazine, the pistol grip of an AR-15, so the whole body of what you know is a rifle. But the buttstock doesn't allow you to put it, into your shoulder well, and the barrel is less than 16 inches. If a weapon has a barrel that has 16 inches, it's legal. If it's less than 16 inches, it's considered a short-barreled rifle. If you have a buttstock, that you can put in your mag or put in your shoulder well, and then a 15-inch barrel, that is now a short-barreled rifle. You have to get a tax stamp. It has to be approved by the ATF. They have to know where you live, and every time you try and go out of state, you have to inform the ATF prior that you're going to be leaving the state with that weapon, because they're trying to keep track of you. There's a bunch of little things like that. If you buy too many weapons at one time, the ATF will come knock on your door and see how you're doing. But you don't hear about those stories. You just hear about the bad ones that ended in disaster. But with that being said, with all the weapons that you can make or you can buy, and everyone having a weapon, it's hard to take them away from the people. It's not going to happen. You can sit there and talk about all you want. It's just going to cause another revolution from some people, like local militias and stuff like that are hiding in the woods, or the 3%ers or something like that. They're not going to allow that to happen. But any more than one person who falls victim to any kind of violent acts of crime is one too many. I agree with that. If we educate, and use our fellow countrymen and women as either a deterrence or a quick response to help, then we will see a decrease in mass shootings and homicides we are trying so hard to achieve. Like I was saying earlier. If we can go ahead and educate the people, and we can have everyone armed, then the likelihood of someone just walking into Walmart and popping off rounds would probably reduce, because he would then know that if he walked in there would be rounds fired back. And no one wants to get shot at. Everyone wants to try to maintain the advantage. That's why a lot of these things happen at school, where everyone's caught off guard. If you have rounds fired back at you, you're not going to want to shoot. I'm just saying that's a deterrent. But my closing statement, and this kind of goes with the whole trying to take weapons after someone else shot it. A wolf attacks a sheep. The sheep dies. Other sheep observe the killing and notice that it's the wolf's teeth that killed the sheep. The sheep remove their own teeth for their own safety, but the wolf still has his teeth and continues to kill the sheep. This is a quote from an anonymous source. I'm not really sure where it came from. But the point is, that's the fear that we're facing right now. Everyone saw that this New Mexico, or this latest shooting, involved a kid running through who was racially motivated to try and take out innocent personnel with a semi-automatic Armalite style, Armalite 15, AR-15. Everyone's like, assault rifle. So everyone saw that he tried to take out a bunch of people with a 30-round magazine. Tried to take out people with a semi-automatic rifle. The rifle looks like something the military uses. They started coming up with outlandish things about how that's a super deadly round, and how the AR-15 can just, do high velocity things. The 5.56 NATO is used in so many weapons. Like I said earlier, the ACE 45, 5.56, the Tavor X95, 5.56. There's an FAL that shoots 5.56. There's a SCAR that shoots 5.56. The 223 could probably shoot a 5.56. That's a hunting round. Everyone's a hunting rifle. So that's not the weapon that determines the ballistic. It's the actual round and the casing and the gunpowder and the size of the lead and the grain and all that other stuff that causes that. But a weapon is a tool, or a firearm, or gun is a tool of a person, and the person wishes to do harm. Like I said earlier, multiple times, they will commit these heinous acts with or without. So I would say taking the firearms from the American people would not be a good idea. It's going to, cause unrest. It's going to be de-arm the law-abiding citizens and allow the personnel who already have weapons on the black market, or have the ability to get more weapons on the black market, to try and attack those who were scared of the weapons because they killed other people, and now they're going to need one whenever they're pinned down at a grocery store or a convenience store, because somebody has a gang initiation that they need to go through and they need to kill 5 innocent people. But hey, that's just my my thoughts on it. I know there's still some people who are way left and some people who are way right. I lean a little bit more to the right, I'd have to say. But I think that I gave some of the left views. And I'm hoping that that will kind of educate you a little bit more, or give you a different perspective, instead of people sitting there on like the news media where they're yelling, you have to, or this is bad, and they're all biased opinions. I'm trying to give you scenarios and times at which, having weapons in the country help people, and the time that other countries where they don't have weapons are not allowed to buy weapons, where crime rate spiked with use of weapons. But yeah, I'm hoping that this was informative and maybe a little persuasive. But we'll find out. Thank you for listening. All right, bye.